You are now entering the Luxecore Studios. And you've secured a seat for the Protecting Your Radius podcast. Here, we build connections from your contracting profession to some of the top bleeding edge products and services. Don't get deterred. Let's not delay. Here is your host, Nathan Downs.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Protecting Your Radius podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Downs, and today I have my good friend, Dan Wheeler from the Fence Industry Podcast. What's up, Dan? How you doing, bud?
Nathan, I'm loving life, dude. I'm loving life. Thank you so much for letting me be on your podcast.
Absolutely.
Hands down, my favorite fence podcast. Hands down, Nathan. And that's not, I'm not blowing smoke, dude. I'm completely honest. So,
wow. Well, we appreciate that for sure. You know, even when all the podcasting started, you know, you were the first one to drop it. And I always remember watching Joe Everest and being part of his over the time and being buddies with him, just loving what he was doing with social media. But I always felt like there was more, more to be said. There was more to be shared. And when you released the podcast the first time, man, I was stoked. I mean, that's why I reached out to you. I'm like, this is freaking awesome. I love it. You know, I just love your passion. I love your desire to grow. And that is, everybody, that's what we're talking about today. Because I wanted to start off, we had a conversation, Dan, you and I were on your Instagram Live a couple nights ago. Today, so as we record this, it's June 11th, 2023. There was an episode dropped on the Fence Industry Podcast. What's the title? It says like Nathan Downs drops bombs or something.
Dropping bombs. Yep.
Okay.
Thursday Night Live IG.
So that's like a 50 minute conversation of you and I. I'm out on my back porch, just hanging out, talking to you. You were asking me a bunch of questions about, just where we're at as business, why we do things the way we do, goal setting. And both of us agreed that there was so much more that could be said. So I wanted to get me in a controlled environment here in the studio and just kind of rehash some of that in a different way and continue that conversation because I think it's so rich. And that's what I wanted to ask you first, Dan, was going back to that and moving forward, goal setting. You know, you asked me quite a bit about this. Well, I want to flip it on its head and ask you, like, what do you think when you're setting goals or what do you think the importance is, like personally and then professionally at the business? And how do you go about that? Like, how do you there's probably people that are listening to this that don't even know where to start. Like, so explain your background with goal setting and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, I'm more of like a vision board type guy. I think there's people that can think about goals. I think people can write goals down, and that's personal or business. But I think you got to do something. You got to find what works for you and stick with it. And it's a perfect example. It's like I was eating breakfast with my new sales guy, Alan. We try to eat breakfast every weekend, a Saturday or Sunday. And we were just talking, and we were talking about what we were going over. And I'm like, holy cow, it's already like more than halfway through the year, like the calendar year. And for us Northerners, right, like we're cooking here. So what I say that to say is, man, the time flies. Time is too short, right? Life is too short. So if you don't have goals either written down or there's a vision board, however you may do it, to me, you're still going to be successful. You can be. I still think you'll accomplish a lot, but I think you can probably get it more defined on like a blueprint. And, like a path and accomplish more quicker, maybe, or easier. I don't know, something like that. If you think about them or you write them down, sometimes that works maybe with guys that are at a higher level, but you got to start somewhere, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just doing it, just the methodology of whether you're doing it with a vision board or writing them down, it's just putting it out into, as I mentioned the other night when we were talking about it, buddy, putting it out into the universe that these are the things that you desire. These are the things you expect. And then what do we have to do as individuals? Well, now we need to put the work behind it because, you could even say, man, I wear my faith on my sleeve sometimes, but faith without works is dead. Okay. So you could flip that on your goals. Goals without works is dead. Right. because you have to be moving towards something. Like you can't just say, I want a Lamborghini and then go, where's my Lamborghini? Anybody listening to this is like missing out on like the, you can see me in, go to YouTube at _podcast if you want to see us having fun talking about this stuff. But you know what I'm saying, Dan? Like just thinking that off the top of my head.
It's like in 2 years, I want a Lamborghini. Okay, it's been a year, and one more year, I'm getting that Lamborghini. But I'm still working, at an okay job, and I have so much more potential, right? Like, no, it don't work like that. You still have to put the work in. That's why having a goal, I think, sets a blueprint.
Yes.
And then you can break it down. Like some people, I heard Robert Whitaker, or he posted a post, man, it's probably a year ago, and he was like, you need to have ginormous goals, like. The Fence Industry Podcast is going to have a live tour type goal with my face on a tour bus all year, something like that. Or for your business, I want 18 locations or something, or 50 employees, whatever it may be. Where I'm like, well, I just want to get my garage built, a new garage, and I want my new pool in behind that. That's what's on my vision board. And he's like, no, you need to go above and beyond, right? And it's just a lot of ways, Nathan, with your business. How do you approach goals and goal setting, and is there measurable marks that you hit, or do you like sit down and reflect? How do you go about it?
No, everything I've done as we're going through it, Dan, is we set up everything off of measurables, right? Like I want to use tangible, real world things, whether it's an item, like I want the company to buy this, right? Mm-hmm. Or it's a dollar mark or whatever. Because what I figured out over my 10 years in contracting, like on the installation side, Dan, is that you can, if you know how to make money and make a profit within your margin, right? Like, so you got that margin and you know how to sell it and do all those things. It makes it a lot easier, right? So I know what the margin is. So I know I don't look at the end results. I actually am using the measuring stick of revenue, right? Because, so that's why you'll hear me talk about that. I mentioned that to you, a little over a year ago, when I just gone full time and you and I were talking and everything. And I'm like, man, we're going to make it, we're going to do this. We're going to make it, we're going to get to 7-figure business. And then I'm going to hit $2 million in revenue. So as far as revenue goes, using revenue as a marker, and going forward and saying like, okay, I want to create a 7-figure business. And then I want to go to the next step and the next step. So we've been using every million in revenue is like our measuring stick. And because fortunately, so I kind of want to stick a pin in this, but I want to say this at the same time, Dan, is there's so many people out there right now that are in different like at different points in the walk, right, of business, and especially in fencing and gates and all these things. There are companies out there that, and I wasn't aware of this, that are, hundreds of millions of dollars large, and you're like, what? And then there's companies that, make $100,000 a year, and that's it. So the field that we're all playing on is so long and so vast and so varied, from your traditional chucks in a truck, all the way up to these multi-generational, we've got dozens of offices all over the United States and this big corporate thing. I mean, so that's a pretty broad gap, right? Like it's a really wide area to play within. But talking to enough people now, figuring like, okay, if we at certain points, like if once we hit $2 million in revenue, which we've done, now we're on to $3 million of revenue. Well, what does that actually mean? Like, where are other people at that point in the stage, right? And then that allows me to gather the data. So when I go back to my vision board or my goal setting, now I know an expectation, right? And that's what I hope. What I really love about your podcast, buddy, is you're interviewing people and asking them these questions. And I don't know if you know, but like I have used the information and what people have said from all of 100 people that have been on your podcast. And I compile my own data, even if it's like in the back of my mind, right? Like, I'm like, okay, so these guys up here at Precision are like so much up here that I want to, all right, if I want to be up there, I need to do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But, if I want to beat these guys, if I want to beat Matt Lowry and we're neck and neck, like, I heard he did this, so I got to do this. And now I want to move on to, I want to chase Josh Glover's company down in Florida or these guys. And there's so many different people, right? I hate to even say a name because I'm sure someone's listening and like pissed off. You didn't say me, Nate.
Well, make sure you say Dan Blanc because you know how he is with the FOMO.
Oh, yeah. Dan Blanc's just doing my fence. Does he have a fence company?
Again, Nathan.
I don't know if Dan Blanc has a fence company.
Oh.
He is the fence king, but I think I'm not quite sure. That might be a name only. But anyways, well, yeah. So what I was thinking was on the big thing that we need to be aware of is just understanding those markers and how we address them and then going from there. So how do you're a vision board guy. Let me ask you this, Dan. How do you look at some of these things when you're trying to put forward your vision at the company, like at River City Fence? What do you actually do? Like, how does that work so mine's a tangible, like written down, you know what I'm saying? So on a vision board, what does that look like on your end, bud?
Yeah. So one thing I realized, and it hasn't been long, probably 6 months. I realized that I have this vision board with this picture of Nathan Downs' office. Like, I want a facility like that because ours is like from 1998, like straight out of a book. And, but I've never made, benchmarks or tangible, milestones measurable. I've never done that before. And that's why I think I struggle at hitting these goals sooner, because if you don't, man, you blink. Like I said earlier, dude, you're halfway through the year already.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And we brought on Alan. I probably should have set goals, by the week and then the month, every other month, and then meetings to see if we're hitting these goals, what he needs from me, what I need from him, or more, or vice versa. Same thing with our new shop guy. This is a perfect example. Like we wanted a shop guy, got one. Okay, great. Okay. But now what? You know what I'm saying? Like he takes a little bit longer to do things than I wanted. He doesn't do things in the order that I want. But guess what? I've never sat down with him and made goals with him and, and laid a blueprint out for him. So, what's that look for you? Nathan, do you literally go month by month? Like, I need to hit this. And then if you're not close to that goal or tangible thing, does a fire get started or how does that work?
That's a great question, man. So the one thing I was thinking about as you were kind of talking there, Dan, it made me think of, you have to be the visionary in your company. My good friend, Matt Warner, talks about being a CVO, a chief visionary officer. That's like what his title is at his companies now. Right. But if you're the leader and you're setting the standard and setting the pace for your organization, you have to have a vision. You have to know where you're going. So let me give you something very, very real we're working towards today. By next year, I want to have our gate service and gate installation for the gate automation, access controls, and everything. I want to have that up and running full steam, independent without me touching it. Okay. So that's a big, hairy goal, right? Like there's a lot of things that have to go into that. So obviously the first thing I need to do, I've already got a truck ready to go. Right. I bought a service vehicle. It's ready to go. We can outfit it within a day's time. We can have that thing flipped over. It's ready to hit the road. So I need a technician or I need a manager that maybe could be a technician too. Right. So kind of one of them. What comes first, the chicken or the egg type deal. Right. But this is what we were talking about on your show, buddy, is that IG Live we specifically spoke to. And I said it, I still think, as things are continuing to grow and looking at where the marketplace is today with the labor force, I think the people are the missing component. Like the most important thing you could possibly have in the entire organization is the right people in the right place. So you may have people in the organization that aren't in the right place, that you might need to move them. But this takes us as the leaders or us as the leaders asking our other leaders within our companies, right? Hey, I feel like we're missing the mark here, or I feel like we could do better. We're not properly yoked here, whatever that looks like. We're not efficient as we possibly could be. Well, why? And having that introspection. So I would like to see, if I want that to happen, Dan, and I've said this now, so it's on the podcast, y'all hear this. If we have an expectation to have that department running up and doing its own thing by next year, I have to find someone by the end of August, so 2 months from now. I have to either have someone in the hopper actively coming on board to the company and already recruited, done, hired, or like we have made a plan, like we've got to get this going. Because what I have seen too many people do, and this has happened multiple times now, it's where I know that a lot of y'all that are listening to this freaking do this, which just pisses me off, because it's just not having enough wherewithal within your work organization to be aware of how this affects other people that work for you, right? And what I want to say is, it's springtime's coming, right? We live in a market where you can't work all year round, or you kind of do, but we know what happens. March, April comes,
Yep.
off to the sky. We might need another person in the office, Dan. I'm going to wait till March 1st before we start looking to hire that person. What are you talking about? You should have hired that person in December when you knew January and February would be slow, to get them up and running, get them properly ready to, you know what I'm saying, to contribute to the team. So that is a big gripe of mine, because I mean, I think it's easy as for business owners to sit back and go, well, you know, it's hard, or we kind of want to wait or whatever. But you have to know what your goals are to tell you. It was just like hiring Lexi in my office. So I've got a new girl in the office, Lexi. She is killing it. I mean, just killing it. It's awesome, dude. It's great. But why that's important is because I actually needed her 2 months ago, but it didn't quite work out. I had hired another lady, you know, all that whole thing. A bunch of you have already heard that. But like, so now that we're here, she's just having to learn a lot more by trial by fire. I mean, like, you're literally in the middle of it. But this is what's probably great about Alan too on your team, right? The right people ask the right questions and if we as the leader or the manager, right, is if we give them the room and the space to fail, but like correct things, right? Like, I'm not perfect. Like, that's what I was telling her the other day. I'm not perfect. You can see I screw crap up all the time, but the difference I have than everyone else is I'm okay with saying, man, I really screwed that up. But how do we make it better? How do we as a system eliminate that? So then, and she's like, click, 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 click. You know what I'm saying? Like, you see her already getting it. I'm like, bro, this is just a couple weeks in. Holy crap. How is this going to be at the end of the year? Oh my God, this is going to revolutionize our business. But it goes back to what I said before. You got to have the right people. You got to recruit, train, and retain the right people, whatever it takes, man, whatever it takes.
Which that just leads you right into work environment. Right. And some of that. So one real quick thing I wanted to ask is, how much of that goal or that vision of your company, so this gate operator guy, this manager or service, like whoever it may be, how much of that do you let in with the rest of your company, with Donnie and everyone else?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how the organization's set up, right? Like in that scenario, because that one thing I've seen across many businesses is the verticals really are their own trade, right? Like, it's very difficult to have fence guys telling gate guys how to do gates, you know, or, you know, you don't want your fence crew showing up and telling the gate technician, like, well, I don't know why you're using a Door King operator. We should have used a high security. I'm like, wait, what? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't want you showing up, Dan, telling me, you're putting in a vinyl fence and I'm wiring up and getting set up to do a LiftMaster, double swing gate for one of your gates. And then you're over there like, well, I really wish you would have used a US automatic. I mean, I'm sitting there going, what are we talking? Like, hey, fence guy, go back to the fence. Right. So it's difficult because I think that it always makes more sense to have it split down into the different disciplines on that end. So like the gate operator guys and the access control guys are all one unit. The outdoor living guys and all those cats that are doing decks and pavilions and pergolas and stuff, they do their own thing, any concrete work, right? And then I would even say on the fence side, you got the residential guys, they're doing their own thing, man. They're jamming. And then the commercial fence guys who may integrate with everyone else, but that takes a different type of team to do that. So I've been in an organization where we've done that and have done it successfully. So within Radius, that's what I'm thinking as I'm setting these things up and we're kind of putting it, just putting people in the right driver's seats to take it, but we're all on the same team going in one direction. So that's where I go back to what we were talking about, a couple minutes ago, was using the revenue marker as the measuring stick is what I do within our organization.
Another thing you said was like people in work. This is exactly like your example when you're like, when you needed someone in the office and you hire them on March 1st or April 1st, you should probably have been in December, because this is the exact conversation we have at River City Fence. Alan hung out and we hired him like April or March 1st or something. He was ready to go like in December. I should have, because now he went from the stain manager and like not installer, but stainer and manager to now he's going full force sales for fencing.
Wow.
Okay. Well, can you pick up a more worse time of the year to train? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I've shot ourselves in our foot like 100 times. So in your opinion, Nathan, this is probably one of the hardest decisions that any growing fence company has to ask themselves. Do you have the people first, hire them first, or do you find the work first?
I think you have to be doing both at the same time. I mean, you have to, like with right now, hiring someone in the office, I noticed the other day, Brenda and Lexi were both in the office, right? And, I could tell that there was a little bit of like, so what are you doing? What am I doing? What are we supposed to be doing? And I told my wife, I said, what's funny is, I don't think we have enough work for two people in the office, but we have too much work for one person.
Yeah.
Right. So like, where's the happy median there? So then I'm like, okay, well, I can find stuff for everybody to do, we can figure this thing out. But like, it was a good example of going, okay, we have outsold what the team should be doing. Right. So now I can add people back into it. But I think the answer to that question that you just asked is specifically in, what does the pipeline look like on the inlet? Right? Because if we're getting calls every day, it's more than enough activity for one person to do, right? That tells me right there that we have the capacity to do that. We're growing, right? And now we could go on to two people, but we're not at two people yet. So what do? Do I leave Brenda and Ashley just out on, out in the cold on their own, just go, oh man, I'm getting killed out here? Or do I say, okay, I'm going to take money out of my pocket, literally hire this new lady, bring her in, train her up to start offloading some of that stuff. So now we can calm down. So it's not such a painful process every day you come in the office. But one of the guys I look up to organizationally is Craig Groeschel. And Craig Groeschel is the executive pastor at Life.Church. And I've gone to Life Church since 2005. So I've been around that thing for a long time when he only had a couple churches. Well, now, so think about this. In the church world, he has the Life.Church has over almost 50 campuses all over the United States, right? They got one in Des Moines, Omaha, all these ones in Oklahoma, New York, Indianapolis, Colorado, Florida, all over the place. But the reason why, he's got a podcast, it's called the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast. It's definitely something everyone should listen to. It's not like Christian stuff or anything. He's a very good organizational leader, but he talks about trying to be lean and mean all the time. So he's always trying to balance what you were saying, Dan, is, all right, can I get more out of the people in the organization now because it's a better use of my resources, or do I need to bring on another team member? Do I need to bring someone on to help offload some of this stuff? So again, I think if you're looking forward and you have a plan, remember the question you always ask everyone on your show, right? For forever was, what's your 1 year, 5 year, and 10 year? And I remember when you asked me that and I was like, oh man, I have a 1 year, 5 year, and 10 year, but at the time, I was like, oh, I just want to survive my first year. That's a real thing, right? But now as we're going and we're doing the work, which is the most important thing, but doing the work and then setting everything in front of you and then backfilling in where we need to have help and get the people is what I think is working. We'll find out next year if I'm right or not, but it sure feels like the right way, Dan. And it feels like the right way in this marketplace right now, seeing with how people are, addressing their jobs and how everyone's just feeling about the economy and all these different factors, right? That you can't say that I don't want to base my life off of all those things, obviously. Like I control my own destiny almost, but again, that goes back to that workload. If I could hire someone like Alexi to offload some of these tasks and allow me to focus back on those things that I'm really, really good at and that sets us apart from our competition, bro, you have to do that as a business owner. Like you have to hear me say that, and now you have to do it and stick your neck out and get it done.
One thing you just said, and we talked about it on that Instagram live, was like not just surviving, but thriving. But when you're young in business, dude, it's hard because you're like pulled in, you're doing it you probably don't even have an office staff, right? Or even if you're doing 5 million, dude, like those plateaus or those humps you're trying to get over. Do you think an outside person or an outside source, whether it's a business coach or a mentor, do you think they can help with looking at your business overall and saying, hey, dude, you're neglecting this big time, and that's what's carrying, or slowing this part of your business down or whatever? In your opinion, do you think that's a good idea or a good way to think about it? Or if not, how do you look at your business from someone else's point of view to see those red flags?
I have read books in the past from Eric Schmidt, who was the president of Google, and from Steve Jobs, which y'all better know who freaking Steve Jobs is, right? Mm-hmm. And most people don't know that both of those guys had a business coach, and it was the same gentleman. His name was Bill Campbell. He passed away a number of years ago, but Bill Campbell was the personal business coach and life coach of 5 or 6 of the top tech, like Silicon Valley executives of all time. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was like, but he's got a couple books, Bill Campbell books. You got to read. I wish I could remember the one off the top of my head. It's got a blue cover. But I've looked at it this way over the past 20 years, Dan. If Steve Jobs, who's a visionary, who's a freaking workaholic like an Elon Musk or something, but if that guy had to have a business coach or a coach to help him get to the next level, man, I'm doomed. Like I just better go, break out the checkbook now and write somebody a check because, you got to go. And I don't mean just any type of coach. You got to vet your people as you get them, but you got to make sure that they're investing and bringing out of you the things that you need to get you to the next step. So for some people, it may be getting a business coach or a mentor like a Sean King or a Tony Thornton.
Robert
these
Whitaker.
guys. Yeah, Robert Whitaker. Yeah, we're actually going to have Robert on the show, on my show, and we're going to break down some really cool stuff about what he's doing coaching wise and stuff. So I didn't say Robert's name at first because I'm asking him. I'm like, are you like taking on more people and stuff? But cat's out of the bag, Robert.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. But like that's what I'm saying is like you've got these guys that in our industry have the capacity to help you find the systems, find the holes, and move you to the next level, and make sure that we're going in the right direction and doing those things. There's other people. My good buddy that's been on my podcast, Kyle Sullivan. He does business coaching and all these other things on the other end. We've got an episode that's dropping or that just dropped by the time you guys see this, where I've been talking about the values and the mission and everything for Radius. It's been things that have been on my heart and in my head for, 3 to 4 years now. And I called Kyle up, paid him. We all had this huge like brainstorm session one night, came over to the house. Me, Ashley, and him were sitting on the back porch, just jamming through all these notes that I had over time. Right, Dan? And I was like, man, I have all these things and I just don't know how to properly put it out there and let people know within our team, but also potential clients and customers, like, what are we all about? Like, and why? But someone like him, like that's what he does. He grows organizations. Like his core thing is he's done it for over a decade is literally recruiting people, training them up and sending them out. Like that's what he does. So he's a coach that can get in the business, find all the stuff and then start churning things out and set things in place to understand how to maximize. He's a maximizer, right? So that's completely different than a systems, a systems person to a maximizer and then of course there's all, I give all these guys a hard time because everybody's a coach anymore. I always crack up. Like I'm like, oh, we're all in the coaching space, or whatever. I say that tongue in cheek because there's sometimes I'm talking to people and I'm like, I wanted to be a business coach before it was a thing. Like, believe it or not, like in 2008, 2009, I was like, oh man, I would be so cool just to go around and help businesses. Cause I realized after reading a lot of books in a short period of time, man, I was like, I can't believe more people don't know this stuff.
Right.
But when I say that, like you need to be hearing that, listening to this content, and then going on Audible, getting yourself a subscription, and then going through listening to our IG live that we did, right? And I mentioned a couple books, but start getting into these books. Read a Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Read or listen. All right, we already talked about this on your show. I call it the same thing. I'm reading it. I'm probably listening to it today, right? But like read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And some of these books are so old, but like anybody that's done any type of self-improvement is going to say start with those because those are the ones that have the meat. You know what I'm saying? Like that'll get you at least into being like, really? Is that's a thing? It is a thing. And you need to be aware of it so that when you start stacking on to that base, that foundation, you can build the tower to success where you want to take it.
Right. The foundation is set.
Yep.
Yep. So real quick you just kind of mentioned that everybody's a coach now, and these programs are out there. One that sticks out, which this is probably a bad example, is like the Arte Syndicate, which is kind of high level. But let's just to say there's another one, Joe Blow program. You see him on Instagram dude, so I see him all the time. 100K first year, you know what I'm saying? Pure profit, 1 million, blah, blah, blah. Would you steer guys towards a coach as compared to a program because of it's more intimate, maybe more accountable? Is that your opinion?
That's a great question. So let me ask you this. When do you go to the gym or have you gone to the gym in the past, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let's go. Yeah, you're missing out. If you're listening, you're missing out to the gun show, ladies. But so I won't throw this back on you. I'll use myself, right? So the strongest points in my life physically have been the times when I had a one-on-one coach. And I say that by one-on-one, that doesn't mean that it wasn't in a class setting. You know, my good friend Aaron Shupp and Josh Drescher, they started a CrossFit gym when CrossFit was brand new. And I started doing that before y'all even knew what CrossFit was. Y'all didn't even know what that shit was. Like, let me be honest, right? And I'm out there doing this. I'm, 300 pounds going like, what are we doing? And they're like, bro, it's going to work. I'm like, all right, here we go. And I got the strongest I had ever been in my entire life, even outside of rugby and football and all that stuff through college. And I was jacked. I mean, I was stronger then. And I'm going, geez, that's crazy, right? Same thing. A couple years later, I've had injuries and all that stuff from sports, so I continue to injure myself. So now I'm at the point now that I'm 40, Dan, I'm not like lifting for like 2,000 pounds on my squat. And people are like, wait, how much did you squat? I was like, I don't know. It was like 715. They're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you wonder why I have broken knees? Well, that might be it, yeah. Right? But like, so then I got with my buddy Sky Magnus, and hit one-on-one coach with me and my wife, right? And we were going through, and it works. Get away. Now I'm on with my buddy Ernie Trujillo, and Ernie's the same way, one-on-one coach. But like every time it's something different, right? It's a class setting, it's a group setting, it's that one-on-one, it's a mix of all the different options or whatever. But having that person that you can interact with, I think is a million times better, because there's things like, Dan, when you and I talk as friends in the business, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll say something and I'll go, oh, bro, dude, bam, right? And hit you and you go, oh, I didn't even think about that. Because you do that stuff to me. You'll say something. I'm like, actually, that's a different perspective, right?
Right.
That interaction just draws something out, and you never know. I think that's why it's important that all of us continue to talk and you try to make friends. You talk about it all the time on your podcast, man, it's so true. You got to get to the next big event. The big events are for meeting other people like yourself or ahead of you, and then allowing you to cultivate that relationship. So where you can call them, you can reach out to them, you can ask for help. You can do that stuff, right? Like, you don't have to have like a coach mentor relationship. But I mean, I know there's people right now that I've met, even being an instructor for Tony Thornton at his at the Fence Consulting Group conferences and the super summits that he does. But some of the people that I've met in there, man, we're like, it's hard to go through any type of like a camp, any type of boot camp or training together with people, grow with people and learn people. And there's on the end side of that, you leave and you're like, oh man, I just made 10 new friends or 40 new friends. I'm sure that's how you feel about going to like Sean King's, right? Like Mr. Fence Academy. Like you go to that, there's 70 people here and you're like, okay, we all buddies now to some degree, but you have those relationships. And that's where I think you've got to use that ability to either in a group setting or one-on-one connect with a coach, connect with a mentor, someone that can immediately on the drop of a hat stop and go, hold on, let me look at this. Well, what you're saying doesn't line up with what I'm seeing, so we can't do that. That's what you can't get out of those courses. And that's why I feel like a lot of people have gotten into the course stuff, because to be honest, Dan, you could just churn out a bunch of really good information, but without that implementation, without that accountability on the backside, man, it means nothing. I could get the greatest eating plan ever, right? But if I don't actually physically eat that way, it does not freaking matter. Like, I can know all these things, I can have all the head knowledge, but I have to have the heart knowledge and I have to have the body knowledge to actually get take it to the next step, get it done.
I 100% agree. It's that accountability thing, man. When you have someone like right now looking at you, Nathan, did you get that done? Where's those numbers? Where's that? Dan Blanc talked about it when a consultant, Ron, he calls him, showed up unexpectedly. And it's like a scramble. And it's true. It's true. When I was at Mission Fence Academy, I said it with Matt Lowry. I had to drive Sean King to his tour bus. And you know what? Every time I got in that car, I'm like, I knew he was going to be asking me, dude, he was grilling me for the 2-minute drive, dude. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to have my A game on. But that's what it takes. That's what you got to get comfortable with, getting uncomfortable, in my opinion.
Yep.
That's just what I think. Another thing, you've said this a few times, dude. Like going back to the business coach, when you were like, man, like I could do this maybe before fencing. Like, it's like you're always ahead of the curve. You think differently, Nathan. Where does that come from? How do you think differently? Or is that just something that comes natural? Or is it something that you read and implemented? How do you know what I'm saying? You always like look at the is it FenceTrac behind you and stuff like that stuff is like next level, and you're pushing it so hard. Yep. You're probably one of the few people in your area that's pushing it that hard. Like, how do you get to that level of just like train of thought?
Yeah. So the old FenceTrac and the Luxecore, again, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you're missing out those beautiful graphics, right? You're missing the Luxecore neon from FenceTrac. No, but like, yeah, I think so. There's another book. Surprise, surprise. Yep. And I'm going to, in the show notes on this, bro, I am putting links for every book I've mentioned on your IG and on here. Y'all have to buy these dadgum books. They're dirt cheap if you buy it on Amazon too, which is why I'm going to put the links on Amazon. You can buy them used for like $1 or whatever, right? But there's a book. It's called Strength Finders 2.0. And Strength Finders is set up for organizations to evaluate. I think there's like 31 different traits that every person carries. Right. So this is like the next level for my STAR training, right? Like you kind of understand you have structured people, technical, action, and relational. Like I use that on the sales side and within our teams to understand the baseline, right? Like a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or something like that. But in Strength Finders 2.0, Dan, it's 31 trait. I think it's 31, but it's the traits that you are inherently like in your soul driven towards. So you asked that question. What's really funny is when I took the test, my number one that was it was maxed out on the thing was visionary. And I was like, visionary. And then next to it, it said futuristic. I was like, well, that sounds about right. So I have always been since a child, right? Like if you would have given me that as a kid and I could have read it, it's the reasons that the things I took a hold of when I was so young were of that idea. It's hard to explain, but let me just say it this way. I'm a huge Star Wars like nerd. And I was as a little tiny guy, but it wasn't about Star Wars. It was about what the world and what that universe brought to my life. Right. And then I just immersed myself into it. Like I've read, dozens of the books that don't mean anything now that Disney bought it. And all the books are crap. Well, I'm like, I spent, I had said before that I never read a book, before some of these self-help books, but the only books that I ever read were fiction books because I was like, well, I'm not reading my school book. I'd rather read the Star Wars book or something, that was me, but like, so even if you see that, man, just that futuristic look, I have that literally in my bones. So it's very easy for me to be always thinking about where are we, like, what's the next steps? Where are we going? Like, what's our end goal? Where are we trying to get to? So the downside of that is the day-to-day minutia destroys people that are futuristic, right? So if I'm stuck in selling fence and doing takeoffs, placing orders, doing this every single day, like it drains me to death because I'm not working in the area that I'm yoked and like where I get re-energized from, if that makes sense. So, but
it does.
It's always been my thing, bro. I've always just been always thinking about how can the world be better? How can we improve whatever this thing we're working on or around? I also cultivated a lot of that when I was young, in elementary school and middle school with the Odyssey of the Mind. They used to have that. I don't know if they do that anymore, but that was a big thing. I did those competitions where we, have 20 minutes to create a bridge that held a, 16-pound bowling ball and stuff like that. And you're like, what? I was like, yeah, it was like Nerdfest, man. It was great. I was like, so I'm like the jock guy, and they're like, yeah, let's build this bridge. They're like, what the freak? Like towering over my team. Yeah, we're doing it. This is funny, but anyways, it's just something. But if you haven't ever heard of that, or you haven't heard of Strength Finders 2.0, I challenge everyone that leads any type of organization. You've got to you get on my show notes, buy that book, and take that test, because, man, I'll tell you what, bro, it'll tell you your top 5 things and you will be like, yep. And it just helps give you something very simple and tangible to work towards about when you start evaluating or talking to a coach about what are things that energize you, what are things that zap your energy, and then how can you make a plan for success for you as much as your organization, right?
That's I'll probably check that out first, because the way you kind of explained that, like when I was at Deere, it's factory work. So, and I was in the fab shop. So I made the same part every day, same thing. And dude, you literally, guys could do it just like this, like watching everyone, you know what I'm saying? Like it's that, like, and it was just drained me, because I'm like, I love working here. I love what I do, but this is not what I want to do. Like I'm in a box, I'm a caged cat. Yep. And, but it makes sense. Like every day, I go out in the field and then I work bids, estimates, and stuff like that. So we get back to the office. I immediately go to my office and I start working while the guys wrap up. But then I can't work on the vision of the business. So this year, and I've done pretty darn well of it, and I've kind of got over that hump of like slacking off on this. I do one thing to make the business, but it's just one step towards a new direction, the right direction, or the direction of my vision, right? Because if I look back after a month, after 30 steps, that's better than being, you know what I'm saying? And then being pissed off that I didn't make any progress. Yep. And I challenge everyone just to do one thing towards your vision or something different, whatever. If you have to start getting to this on your company of doing things this way, do one thing to change, one thing.
And that, Dan, I was going to say, as we kind of wrap things up here and put a bow on it, as I always say, we were talking about that just at the gym over the last couple of weeks, and Ernie was challenging our whole group about, man, every day wake up and get 1% better. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay. But he said, what's 1% of a day? We all stood around like, who's got a calculator? Where's your phone? Yep. He says I think it's 14 minutes and 40 seconds is 1% of a day. So if you wanted to improve in anything, 1% today and tomorrow, think 15 minutes. What does that take? Well, if I wanted to get 1% better on my physical health, I could go outside and take a 15-minute walk with purpose. Well, I tell you what, man, Dan, you could actually put in your headphones and take a 15-minute walk, and you could get 1% better in your health and 1% better in your brain by listening to a podcast, right? Everyone already listening to this is doing it. Okay, but how do we intentionally change that 1%? And if we think about it with our time, the one thing we can't make more of, right? You hear a lot of business leaders talk about that, right? So is that 1%? So 15 minutes, what can I do with 15 minutes today that I didn't do yesterday that can continue to get better? And then start concentrating on that. Because imagine at River City Fence, imagine what you do if you actually did the 15 minutes every single day and continue to get 1% better after a year of doing that. I mean, it would be, you would have completely revolutionized everything. And you didn't, and I say you didn't mean to, but you did mean to, but like with those, it's always the baby steps, and that's what I was. So wrap this up. I know you had one more thing. What do you, I want to hear you bounce back something to me about, man, everything we were talking about, dude.
Man, this is the perfect question to kind of wrap this up. And when you start talking, you're going to the gym now and stuff like that. So this is perfect. How much time do you invest in you or on you, whether it's education, spiritual, physical, do you set time aside? Do you schedule it? Do you squeeze it in no matter what? How do you do it?
Yeah, I think you have to make a choice, and then you have to stick to it and not let the world dictate what you want to do. I mean, there's so many times where you got to be flexible, so you don't want to beat yourself up. I think that's an easy thing to do too, because one of these books I just read, they were talking about the habits of people as they're forming. This is really crazy, Dan. Think about this. If you and I called each other tomorrow and we say, tomorrow's Monday, okay? And we're going to be doing keto. Like everybody knows what keto is, right? So something very simple. You and I are doing keto and we're going to keep each other accountable to keto, right? And we're do good on Monday. We do good on Tuesday. I call you Wednesday. You're like, I had to grab an energy drink. My caffeine, hey, bro, I get it. I'm going to go grab an energy drink too, because my caffeine loss is making my head explode out here in the field. Oh, all right, cool. Yeah. All right. Thursday, we're killing it. Friday comes along. I'm like, man, I was like, the kids got school, but I made a salad or got a thing after school tonight. I made a salad, so I'm ready to go with this. But then I got my protein over here and all this. And you're like, cool. Yeah, Sandy has a work thing, so we're going to have to figure this out. I'm like, all right, well, let me know how it goes tomorrow. Well, when we talk on Saturday, I'm like, oh man, the kids' school thing went so long. I didn't get back to my food. I should have thrown it in the car. They wanted McDonald's. I'm like, oh, frick. And I'm like, man, I did so good. I lost, 12 pounds this week, but one McDonald's isn't going to kill you or whatever. But I didn't, I just had a small French fry or something like that just to hold me over. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, no, Sandy and I did great last night. We went out. I ate them. Okay, good. Then Saturday's there. We just talked, right? Sunday comes. Well, how'd you go? And then I tell you, well, man, the kids, we had baseball for my son and, we got stuck out again. And, I don't know. And you're like, oh no, I'm on it. We'll stick to it. And we keep talking. So what happens is me on that flip side of that, right? On the accountability spectrum, me, as I make a mistake, my brain immediately tells me that I can't do it. Like, see, you told Dan you wanted to eat keto, but your actions show that you don't want to eat keto. So it's a lot easier not to do it. So you should probably just stop. And then you're like dialed in, you know what I'm saying? You're continuing on. And then I'm lagging behind. But what my subconscious tells me to do, man, is just stop. But I think that's the thing that we need to look at in every aspect of our business and our lives is when you see someone stop and they said they had a goal and they said they wanted to do something, they need a hand up or a hand forward. They need to be drugged forward to be like, no, this is not when you stop. If you make a mistake, that doesn't mean you're out of the game, right? It's like playing football. Like if you guys play any team sports, hell, I don't care what it is, right? Like you make a mistake and the other team scores, the game is not over. Like in that way, that works with our lives. So, I'm sitting there going, I've got my, my meditation time, my prayer time, spiritual time. I've got working out. I've got all these things. But there's a day where, if I worked super late the night before, I'm not going to go. I usually go to the gym at 5:00 in the morning. I'm not going to go to the gym. I need to go to the office. Well, now I have to make a choice on how am I going to make up that time. And then I will schedule that in. Like, because before the office opens, I'm pretty fortunate that time is mine, right? And then late at night, that time's mine. But what I found is over the years that we get so busy and work, especially in construction, you could work forever and you're never going to be caught up. Like, just realize that. There's always something else to do. There's always someone that's mad. There's always someone that's like, I just want to get an estimate from you. And you're like, me too. It's like, like, we all deal with that, it's so funny, but again, that's where I think of, I find I have those blocks of time where I can manipulate things as necessary. But if I move something out, what I've done better as I've gotten older, because before I would have defaulted to just, Yeah, we'll just get rid of that. But now as my kids are getting older, like I said, I just turned 40. So I'm like older. I don't feel older, but I know, like I'm at an age where I'm starting to think about things going like, okay, we talked about the 1%. We talked about what that means in a day, right? The 1% of time. So what am I like? How am I actually investing my time as opposed to just spending my time? And there's still things I would even say one thing I like to do, Dan, is I am a huge movie guy. Like I grew up a movie buff. I mean, and that goes back to my futuristic sense, right? Like everyone's like, wow, man, how'd you get into movies so much? Well, it was because I was always imagining something bigger and better than myself. Right. So, but there's shows that I love to watch, but I'll actually set time aside to be like, actually I am going to watch that. Like I remember that season drops, in 2 weeks. So I need to get my stuff caught up. So if I am going to binge this or I'm going to watch this, I have the slots available in my schedule, but I don't waste time just watching TV or doing, you know what I'm saying? Like that, right. Like you be intentional, I guess is my biggest thing about it, and be intentional with every part of that, but don't neglect yourself for the success or for the future that you think you want, because then one day you'll wake up and you'll see that you missed out on so many things. And the one thing I think of all the time that I don't want to miss out, and I don't want any of you guys missing out on, is your family stuff. Like, what does it mean to gain the world if I lose my wife in the process? Like I become a multimillionaire. I build these big businesses and all this stuff, but I lose my marriage. Right. That doesn't work for me. What if I go on to do all these great things and, revolutionize the industry or something like that? And it's, oh man, Nathan Downs is great, but my kids don't know me. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like I never went to my kid. Like I have to give up coaching football for my son. Like that doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? So I think those are the things when you ask that question, I immediately go to, you have to have non-negotiables, but then you really have to know, maybe not even in your schedule, like have a schedule that's flexible, but really know what goes back to the whole thing we've been talking about. What are your goals? And those are my two primary things. Is I want to have success in the business marketplace. Like that's what we work towards every day. Me and a couple of my buddies, we talk about this all the time. The purpose of my business is to make a profit. But the purpose of me is not my business, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to differentiate that and when we're out there and know that like when I introduce myself to someone, like I'm not Nathan Downs, the founder of Radius Gate and Fence Company. Like that's not who I am. I'm not Nathan Downs, the podcast guy. Nah, that's not who I am. You know what I'm saying? I'm Nathan Downs, the husband and father. Right. Who wants to have a great life one day, who wants to help we have grandkids and see the family and set forth a trajectory within our family. But at the same time, Dan, make a difference in the world around us in whatever we've been allowed to do. And hopefully stuff like you and I are doing with this stuff, maybe it'll just drop a little thought or a little nugget in someone's mind just to think bigger than themselves, because you're not just building a fence. You're not just putting in a gate. You're not just doing all these things. You're protecting things. You're creating, as we talk about, now with my new vision statement and mission statement of the company, we're creating environments to protect what people value most. And that's it.
I love it. That's awesome, dude. That's awesome.
Cool. Well, buddy, thanks. I rambled on long enough. We want to appreciate Dan Wheeler for coming on and asking me a ton of questions. He and I were talking about this. Dan, if you ever want to have a follow-up, we can just continue doing a series where we ping pong this thing back on our shows. But I'm sure there's a lot that you want me to ask you about and get into, because I can just see you itching. Sometimes you're like, I want to say something, but I forgot I'm on Nathan's show. So everybody out there listening to this, definitely continue to just do everything with the Fence Industry Podcast. Man, we've just been blessed. Everyone's been blessed by you, buddy, by the people you bring on, the questions you ask, just the insight and everything. Your inquisitive mind, again, has established what you see on my end over here. Just between you and Joe Everest were the first two. And then watching what Dan and Cannon did really kind of propelled me into the space of thinking like, hey, this is something that I could do. but it's something I actually desire to do because I love to learn and be a consummate learner. And I'd love to see everybody out there that listens to this stuff, that consumes it, just to get better. Just like I said, for all of our families, for sure. So, buddy, I appreciate you coming on. Hey, what's your tags and handles and everything online for them to follow, of course?
The Fence Industry Podcast everywhere. TikTok, Instagram is my big main two. Facebook, but you'll see me there poking around every once in a while. But Instagram, that's where I'm at. That's where I live. Tune in. Love it. Every Wednesday and Saturday.
So good. Yeah, guys, definitely check that out. And as always, we appreciate each of you for coming on out, and we will see you on the next episode. Peace.
You've been listening to the Protecting Your Radius podcast from the Luxecore Studios in Bixby, Oklahoma. Thanks for sticking around, and connect with us and all of our partners at www.protectingyourradius.com. We want to thank our premier partners, Luxecore, the newest line of premium quality composite infill to slide into your FenceTrac fence system. Frame your style today. Also, FenceTrac, the world's first patented standalone stain machine. Utilizing flood coat technology, FenceTrac covers boards, pickets, posts, and any type of dimensional wood you can think of. And what better way to use your FenceTrac machine than to use the easy application Wood Defender family of stains. Wood Defender goes on easy and covers in one coat with no back brushing. And of course, the true power of our show is you, the listener. Please rate and review our show on whatever platform you consume this content. Your 5-star likes and reviews help other contractors get the message that we all want to be better and do better. And in the construction world, we can never forget that before you can be great, you've got to be good. Before you can be good, you've got to be bad. But before you can even be bad, you've got to try.